Hi, in this video we're going to look at the rubric review assignment, which is listed under week 10. If you don't see it right now, it's at the top, but if you're looking at this at a later date, you may not see it. Oh, you can always come down to the topic section, click on week 10, and that's going to show you the assignment. Now, the assignment has a couple of resources associated with it. It has some directions, it has an example, and then it has a template that you need to fill out. So to do that, you want to go into the Open button, because I'm viewing this as a student in this case, so that you're seeing it exactly the way you would see it yourself. Those supportive files are up here, and then the template is down below, and that's what you want to work with. You want to work with the template that was provided. So let's open that up. We click on it. It opens up, and you can see one strand of the rubric on the first page. Here's a general description of what we're looking for. Here are the 3 levels of the rubric by which it would be assessed. If this were me, what I would do is I would simply read down the highest level of the rubric. So this is really encapsulating. I would read this general description up here and the highest level, and this is encapsulating what a really good project would include. And then you can simply click in the box underneath here, and you can explain what about your particular project is going to address these intentions or these goals for the rubric. Okay, if I go back to the assignment for a second, you're going to see that there's an example here. And this is, so you can get comfortable with what the process is, basically how much you should be writing, how you're going to address those things. And I understand that for certain strands of the rubric, particular strands, that maybe the answers or the input might be similar between different projects. That's fine. What I don't want you to do is simply come in here and cut and paste the model. Okay, if you're doing that, you're just avoiding any thought about how your project matches up to the rubric, and the entire point of this assignment is to get you focused on what should be in that project. Okay, so you're welcome to read it. If it was me, I might read 1 or 2 to kind of see how it worked, or if I got stuck, I might look at something, but please avoid just copying and pasting. That's going to be obvious, and it's not very productive for anybody. Okay, so let's go over the rubric now so you get an idea of the types of things that should be included. I would recommend, giving a read up at the top. That's a good idea. I'm going to just do the high box on the left so that the video doesn't, drone on forever. But these 2 things are going to be fairly similar, but not always identical. So what you do want to do is read here and read here. So the hierarchy of this page is clearly evident at first glance. Related materials are clearly grouped in a logical relationship, and the method of organizing information is evident and consistently employed. So in using Google Sites, a lot of this work is going to get done for you depending on how you create your pages. In other words, which pages are sub-pages of other pages. It's going to organize that overall menu for you, and putting some thought into that, not just having a bunch of pages on one site, but actually nesting them, actually thinking about sections and subsections, etc., and getting your page organized is going to make this site a lot easier for your users. Okay, navigation and flow. So the verbiage used in the hyperlinks is always clear and intuitive. Navigation is added to default navigation has been employed where useful. Links between pages are employed in an effective and consistent manner. Resources open or download in a consistent manner that can be articulated. Okay, again, because of the tool that you're using for the site, a lot of this work is very easy for you. In the old days when you were kind of creating your own site or with certain tools, if you use certain tools for this process, it will be a little more work. What I mean by verbiage used in hyperlinks is always clear and intuitive. You want to avoid things like click here. Click here tells you nothing. The text itself tells you nothing. So what you want to do is have the text of that link describe what's going to happen when you click it. So if you were going to open or access a particular activity worksheet, for lack of a better example, the text would say maybe get scaffolding worksheet. So that can be in normal text. You would say to complete this activities, open the scaffolding activity worksheet, and then use part of that text, the descriptive part of that text, to actually create the link. When I refer to the default navigation, that's the menu that gets built in Google Sites. So again, that's really handled by how you nest and organize the pages. Now, in addition to that, you'll often want to include links within the site. As a matter of fact, when you're on a page and you're linking to an outside resource, such as a website that you don't control, certainly that link is not going to be part of the main menu, but part of the page. And you just want to give some thought to how you introduce those links, where you put them, etc. The last thing about opening and downloading in a consistent manner, again, using a different tool, you would have the choice of whether they open in a new window or whether they open in the existing window. Google is going to handle a lot of that for you, so it's making the consistency part fairly easy. But do think in terms of from page to page how you organize things. Okay, so that your user can come to find that works in a consistent manner and make it a little easier for them. Okay, next strand in the rubric, mechanical technical aspects. Basically, this means everything works. All your pictures load, all your links link to where you expect they would link to, and those sites open. All spelling and grammar are correct. Basically, everything works. The biggest consideration here is as you're creating your own products through Google Docs or some other tool, it could be a Prezi, it could be anything. Make sure that the permissions are set such that the user can access them. And the best way to do this is to open up a browser that you are not logged into and give all that a test. Okay, so we don't want the user to get in there and go to open up a file and find out that it's requesting permission and they can't get the resource that they need for their assignment. Okay, next strand in the rubric. Required elements. All pages are included. All properties are included on all pages. All images are cited in the appropriate page used and are in APA format. So what you want to do here is you want to make sure, again, in the footer that you have an identifying text for you as the author, an email link, and that disclaimer text. You also want to make sure that if you are going outside and getting images, and even if they're Creative Commons images, you really do want to, cite the source. It's just a courtesy that you have a page to do that. This says all images cited on the page. You're welcome to do that down at the bottom. You're also welcome to create a separate page for resources and to cite them in APA format. So those are the things that are involved in required elements. Okay, effectiveness of homepage. The purpose and essential question are included and well developed. Okay, what this means is put some thought into this. The first, most users, when they go to a website, are going to make a decision whether to stay on that site within about 2 seconds or less. Now, you have a bit of a captive audience if you're giving your students an assignment, and it was not well designed, or if they feel obligated for the assignment, they're going to stay and find it. But just good website practice is that things are clear, easy to use, engaging. Okay, so you want to get some of that first text that's on that page, maybe accompanied with an image or whatever, but to give users an idea of what's going on that site. And a great way to do this is to have the essential question. You might want to, likely not just rotely post the question, but after the question, maybe include a little bit of text that develops the idea or generates some interest. Okay, What we want to avoid are things like, on this site you will do this work. What you want to do is generate interest or try to make it engaging, not as just a task that someone has to complete. Okay, the essential question and the topics and the purpose is related to issues larger than site objectives and an attempt to engage the user in an investigation of a complex and wide-ranging issue. Okay, so try to make a connection that shows the importance of what you're doing, not simply that you're required to do this, so do A, B, and C. Okay, the verbiage draws the user into a scenario or situation well suited and stimulating audience interest. Again, instead of just throwing a sentence up there, spend some time and develop the context. That's basically what that means. And this relates to the homepage. Okay, scaffolding of activities. We've done an assignment on this, and what this basically means is that while you are going to need lower level activities, everything from vocabulary to some basic skills, you need to have these activities build to something that reaches the higher levels, and we're using as our gauge Bloom. Okay, so there could be different gauges you could use to do this, but for our purposes we're just going to say, are you getting to that creation level where students are making something new and original, and are you engaging them in this process of evaluation where they're reflecting on both their product and their process in reaching it? So get them thinking about their own thinking and how they approach this task and what they might do differently or what worked really well for them, how they leverage their strengths, etc. Okay, the other thing about this is to check for understanding. So checks for understanding are built in so the user and instructor can assess progress during each activity. So what you don't want to do is give them a complex task and then wait till they complete that for a measurement. Okay, so two types of assessment here really. You're asking them to reflect and evaluate, and that's on their own work, so on the product and process of their own work, but you're also building in some objective checks for understanding all along the way. So you make sure that they have the component pieces or the foundational pieces to be successful in what they're doing. Let's get down here to quality and relevance of resources. And these are outside resources, things that you found on the internet that you did not create. So there's a clear and meaningful connection between all of the resources and the information needed for students to accomplish the expected outcomes. Okay, you wouldn't include something if it didn't, if it didn't really support what you were hoping to do, what your objectives were. So you want to make sure that you're not just grabbing some things and randomly filling them in to meet a requirement, but that they're well researched and that they really support what you're doing. Every resource offers new information or new connection to information to enhance metacognition. Okay, so you want things that are going to move your agenda forward. Not three versions or three sites that do essentially the same thing. Not that you couldn't include multiple sites, but that most of your resources as they come in are offering something that your other resources don't. Okay, and outside resources complement original content to provide the rich support for the mastery of each task. Okay, so we're going to look at that in a second, but basically what you're finding on the internet that other people are providing complement and support the things that you're going to be creating yourself. So let's go down and look at that now. This is the quantity and quality of original content. Substantial original content has been created that is well organized, age appropriate, and a combination of the outside resources clearly and specifically supports student mastery of objectives. Okay, so this is the other half of it. These are the things that you create. So it has substantial original content. You have created a good number of things that bridge between what's available on the internet and what the goals you have for your students. It provides learning opportunities that exceed those available through outside resources. It's very unlikely you're going to be able to piece together a complex project simply through finding resources online, and your work, what you create, is a process of building the bridges between that and your objectives. Oh, come on now. Let's jump down here. That's a little distracting. Okay, here we go. Differentiation. Directions are accurate, explicit, clearly stated, and written in age-appropriate language. Okay, so you want to take your time with this. This can be more complex or more challenging than you might originally think. Is remember, you're not there to give these directions, so you really do have to think them out so that from the user's standpoint, they understand completely what's going on. And then you want to give 3 or more examples of differentiated activities and student outcomes, and that they're clearly evident there. So we're not asking you to recreate this project. You may actually go into a teacher section, create a page that has things like your cited resources and some other things that we're going to look at, and give some examples of how to differentiate. These can be descriptive in nature. They don't have to be necessarily 3 versions of the same activity or notes or tasks or whatever, but a description of how this can be adjusted for both students that might require additional support and for those students who find the content or the objectives not as challenging as you would like. For those students who are going to be at the top of your class, they're going to go through these things very easily, and maybe they're going to finish up early, and they're not going to find it as much of a challenge as some of the other students. So you want to provide for them as well. Okay, teacher-created student model. 2 or more models of completed student activities are present and clearly illustrate mastery of desired objectives. Models are excellent examples of constructivist thinking and should compel students to produce similar work. So basically what you want to do, I've given you a model for this activity. You want to try to find a way to show students in some cases an example of good work, or an example of work that could be better, but with an annotation or an explanation of what could be better or how it could be made better. So one way to do this is if you've got an activity that's got repetitive, maybe it's got a series of questions or something. Maybe repetitive isn't a good word, but it's got a series of questions. You might want to give one sample of a correct answer or of a good answer. Sometimes they're not always correct or incorrect, but they're better or less good. So that would be one way to do it. Another way to do it would be to have, especially of a high-level project, an example of a completed activity, and then either a video or some notes or something about what makes that an excellent example, or where that example falls short in certain areas. Now, this can be tricky. What you don't want to do is simply give them an example of a completed project that they're going to copy. And it's very easy to do. Once you give an example and once somebody has reviewed that, it's very easy for that to strongly influence their own project, kind of close their mind down. And that's the last thing you want to do. So sometimes if it was an essay, you could give them an example of a different essay that illustrated the same points that you wanted to call attention to. Okay, same thing if it was some kind of hands-on constructed model. There could be an example of one that was not exactly on the same topic, but illustrated the same skills and the same points. Okay, so it can be a little tricky. You want to have at least 2 examples. One certainly can be a simple example, but think about which activities would be best supported by this. Now, if a base level activity such as here's some vocabulary and learn this vocabulary in these terms, that's probably not the best one, especially if you've got students who are already somewhat proficient in that skill. Okay, let's take a look. Method of assessment. So coming back to how students know along the way that they're progressing in a satisfactory way. So rubrics or other outcome measures are present for each activity, are clearly written and easy to understand, and provide superior ongoing formative assessment to the student. The standards against which the student outcomes are measured are set high and embrace the concepts of metacognition and constructivist thinking. So basically, anytime you ask the students to do something, there should be a check for understanding. Sometimes in a whole class activity, you're going to have an exit ticket, which could take a number of different forms. It could be a quiz. It could be a short quiz for simple content. It could be asking students to write about something in an open-ended way for something more complex. It could be based on rubrics. Could be based on checklists. But students need to have a measure. If you're going to bother to do something, there needs to be a measure so that students know if they're successful, and so that they also feel responsible for producing work of a good quality. Pedagogy and citations. This is one of the ones that's on the teacher side. So good idea for this is to create a page, and this is where you hold a discussion about teachery type things. So all citations are included and are in proper location, are in appropriate format, and are cited correctly. So that's mechanical. For some people, this may apply strictly to images. You may not have used other sources. Remember, if you're linking to an outside website, something like that, you don't need to cite that as a source. Okay, you're providing a link, and that's fine. But if you've taken things directly out of research or articles, or if you're using something from like an image or something directly in your site, then you're going to need to do that. Again, be cautious. Just because you can acquire that image doesn't give you rights to it. So open source images are your best route. Alternatives would be to contact the owner of an image and say, hey, this is an educational site and I'd really like to use it. That can be a good method. But just be careful. Just be careful as you go that you're not infringing on anyone's copyright. Okay, the second part is a thorough analysis of pedagogical elements of the project is included on a teacher's page or in a teacher's page. And what does this include? This includes things like Bloom's taxonomy that we've discussed, multiple intelligences, SAMR, which we've discussed over time, differentiation of instruction, essential questions, correlation to the standards, and other elements of pedagogy, that you're comfortable with and apply to your project. So this is a discussion of your project from the teacher perspective. Okay, student outcomes. Student outcomes or tasks are referenced to standards and are clearly connected to what students must know and be able to do to achieve proficiency of those standards. So you simply relate it to the standards that are addressed. And what I'd like you to do is include both the content standards that you may think of initially, such as this is language arts or this is math, but also references to the text standards. Okay, we've done 2 activities on text standards, and those are meant to be integrated into the curriculum, not as a special subject or addressed specifically in a class, such as a technology or programming class. Those are meant to be incorporated in the student's daily work. Okay, in-person presentation. So as part of your culminating project, you're going to do 2 things. You're going to do a formal presentation like a PowerPoint or a Google Slides or a Prezi or something like that, and we'll get to that in a minute. But you're also going to do this in-person presentation in front of the class so that we can see what you've done, so you can share your work with us. Obviously, it should be clear, well organized, and well rehearsed. So you do want to take time to go through this. Maybe you want to present it to a colleague. Maybe you want to run through it a couple of times yourself, so you're very comfortable, so you don't skip over anything important, or an equally I don't want to call it dangerous, but an equally undesirable outcome would be to get caught up in all the details and go into more than you need to. So you want to plan it out, not just wing it. It conforms to specified time limitations, which are listed above. That's 8 to 12 minutes. So after all this work, you should have at least 8 minutes of material to present. Could be as high as 12. And it addresses each of the strands of the rubric in a balanced way. So you want to engage your audience, but the rubric's here for a reason. The rubric's here to tell you what is important, what should be included in the project, and while you're up there, you want to kind of use that as a checklist or a guide in making your presentation. And the last piece down at the bottom is the slideshow presentations. So again, you can do this in any format you'd like. PowerPoint, Google Slides, Prezi, etc. If you're thinking of doing something outside a formal presentation, just give me a heads up before you even get started. I mean, not really appropriate to do this as, say, a Google Doc where it's just a list of bulleted points. It really should be in a presentation type format. Okay, so it's clear, concise, provides a thorough overview of the completed project, and addresses the project's adherence to each strand of the rubric. So basically, this presentation, this slideshow, is your way of defending your project, your thesis, having to defend it. And it should list out, to put it in a good light, it should clearly address all of the elements of the rubric that you want to claim as having completed. Okay, so now, this does not mean it has to be 60 slides long and verbose. You can do this in a concise way. You might have a slide on differentiation and just call attention briefly to, very briefly, to where that differentiation is occurring. Okay, and where that can be found in your presentation. Now, screenshots, non-text elements, and examples from the presentation help clearly illustrate important elements. So, it doesn't have to be there for everything, but for certain things, such as some of the project work you've created or something like that, it's going to pay to take a quick screenshot and put it up there, because that's going to help illustrate your point through the presentation. Okay, if you have any questions about that, of course, give me a call or send me an email. But basically, the purpose of this is to focus you very, very clearly on what should be included in this presentation. What should be included in this project overall, and we hope that this rubric review is going to help do that for you.